The stunning landscapes of New Caledonia often mask a really significant political challenge simmering just beneath the surface.
Hmm.
And look, this isn't just a local affair. The ongoing instability, the deadlock in negotiations about its future, well, it could send ripples across the Pacific and maybe beyond.
Yeah, definitely.
So today we're diving deep into why these talks have stalled, the very different futures being proposed, and the really critical role that a changing population is playing in shaping New Caledonia's destiny.
Exactly. We're trying to unpack a complex situation that's followed, a pretty significant period of unrest.
Right.
Our goal is really to give you a clear understanding of the core issues at play. We're drawing on some insightful analysis from the interpreter.
Good source.
Yeah. We'll look at what's preventing agreement and what the shifting demographics really signify for the future of this territory. It's
Yeah.
particularly relevant, I think, for those of you following international relations, self-determination movements in the Pacific. So let's get right into it. These recent negotiations, the ones led by French Minister Manuel Valls, they were meant to chart a course forward, right?
Mhm.
But they ended in stalemate. What were the key sticking points?
Well, the failure of these talks, as the interpreter highlights, carries a real weight. Valls himself actually spoke of heavy threats, of chaos if no agreement is reached. That's pretty serious language.
It is.
And what's particularly interesting here, I think, is that France actually put a significant proposal on the table. They suggested a willingness to hand over elements of sovereignty.
Yeah, that was big.
That's a substantial shift, isn't it? And one that apparently sparked, well, considerable discussion back in Paris.
Indeed. And the two main proposals on the table, they represent fundamentally different visions for New Caledonia's future. You had the loyalist parties, those who advocate for New Caledonia remaining part of France.
Right.
They put forward a federalist model. Their idea was to grant more autonomy, to the provinces with a Kanak majority.
Mm.
Well, while the southern region, which has a larger European population, would maintain closer ties to France.
So a kind of regionalized autonomy, but still within the French framework. But that didn't gain traction, did it? Why was it rejected so decisively?
Precisely. Well, Minister Valls and the independence groups both rejected this federalist approach.
Both sides.
Both sides rejected that particular proposal, yes, because it essentially proposed a partition of the territory.
Ah, okay.
And this directly contravenes the spirit and the specific stipulations of the 1998 Noumea Accord.
Right, the accord.
That accord served as the roadmap for New Caledonia's path towards self-determination, and it explicitly ruled out the division of the islands. That accord is, well, it's a cornerstone of the whole ongoing political process.
Okay, that context about the Noumea Accord's prohibition on partition, that's crucial then. It explains why the Federalist idea was basically a non-starter.
Exactly.
So if that was off the table, what was France's alternative, the one involving this significant shift on sovereignty you mentioned?
Right. France's proposal was, a real departure. It involved a delegation of key sovereign powers to New Caledonia.
Okay.
But, and this is the tricky part, with a mechanism for the potential immediate redelegation of some or all of those powers back to France.
Interesting.
It also included provisions for dual French New Caledonian nationality and a mutually agreed international status for New Caledonia, all sort of within the overarching framework of the French Constitution.
Can you give an example? Like, what kind of powers are we talking about?
Well, think of it like France offering New Caledonia the keys to certain governmental functions. Maybe control over some natural resources or internal affairs, perhaps.
Okay.
But with this pre-agreed condition where France could potentially, take those keys back under specific circumstances.
That's a really helpful way to visualize it.
Yeah.
So how did the different sides in New Caledonia react to this rather complex offer?
Well, the reaction was quite telling, actually. Independence leaders, while they acknowledged that France was making tangible progress on its decolonization commitments, under the UN framework, they still felt the proposal required considerable refinement, needed more work.
Okay, so cautious, maybe.
Cautious, yeah. But the loyalist parties reacted very strongly against it, very negative.
Really? Why?
They saw it as essentially independence in association. That's a concept closely resembling a 1985 plan they had previously rejected quite firmly.
So it felt like deja vu for them.
Exactly. They even suggested that Valls' proposal had effectively undermined any possibility of further negotiation. Strong words.
Strong opposition indeed. It really highlights the deep divisions that persist, doesn't it?
It does.
Now, the interpreter also emphasizes the pivotal role of changing demographics in this whole equation. Can you break down why these shifts are so significant?
Absolutely. This is really key. The ongoing census in New Caledonia is going to provide a crucial snapshot of the territory's current ethnic makeup.
Right, the numbers.
But we already have clear trends indicating a significant shift. Over the past few decades, we've seen this consistent pattern, a decline in the European population,
Okay.
and a corresponding increase in both the indigenous Kanak population and other non-Kanak Pacific Islander populations. These demographic shifts are, you could say, the engine driving the independence movement's growing strength and fundamentally altering the political landscape.
And we have some concrete figures that illustrate this trend, don't we, from past censuses?
Yes, we do. The 2019 census, for instance, revealed that Kanaks constituted 41% of the population. That was up from 39% in 2014.
Okay, a noticeable increase.
And during that same period, the European population decreased from 27% down to 24%.
Right.
The remaining 35% were primarily other Pacific Islanders. And look, this isn't just a statistical footnote. It represents a tangible shift in the composition of New Caledonia.
And it sounds like these trends have potentially accelerated even further recently, particularly after the recent violence.
That's the strong indication, yes. Official net departure figures from, say, 2015 to 2022 averaged around 2,000 people per year leaving.
Mhm.
The majority were believed to be non-Kanak.
Okay.
However, following the violence in 2024, anecdotal evidence, reports from the airport authority, they point to a dramatic surge, an estimated 10,000 net departures in that single year.
Wow, 10,000. That's significant.
It's huge. This significant exodus strongly suggests that the Kanak population is likely nearing 50%, maybe even pushing past it soon.
Yeah.
And the European population is likely decreased further. That's a profound demographic shift happening in a very short period.
And how do these demographic changes directly influence the debate around independence?
Well, the link is quite direct. As the interpreter points out, the 3 independence referendums held between 2018 and 2021, they clearly demonstrated that support for independence is concentrated in areas with a higher proportion of indigenous Kanak people,
Right.
while opposition is stronger in the more European-populated areas like the South. Therefore, these ongoing demographic changes are likely to further solidify the support base for independence, and they will inevitably shape the potential outcomes of any future vote on self-determination. This isn't just about numbers, it's about the fundamental identity and aspirations of the people who call New Caledonia home.
It's a fundamental reshaping of the electorate, really. Now, the immediate trigger for the violence in 2024 was reportedly the issue of electoral reform. What's the current status of that? Is there any movement?
Interestingly, the interpreter suggests there might be a potential area of compromise here. A small one, perhaps? There seems to be a possibility of a small meeting of minds, as they put it, on the issue of broadening voter eligibility. The current rules actually exclude some long-term residents, both Kanak and European, believe it or not. So if an agreement can be reached on this specific aspect, just broaden the franchise slightly, it would pave the way for provincial elections to proceed.
Which would be important.
Exactly. It could offer a more current reflection of the electoral strength of each side, which is vital, really, for any future substantive negotiations.
So even within the broader deadlock, there's maybe a chink of light, a potential small step forward on this crucial electoral reform issue.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Something to watch.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit then and consider the wider implications. New Caledonia's situation is happening in a vacuum, is it? What are the strategic considerations for, say, Australia and the broader Pacific region?
That's a really important point. Given New Caledonia's strategic location in the South Pacific, right there near Australia, any significant shift in its political status has the potential to substantially reshape the regional geopolitical landscape.
How so?
Well, Australian policymakers in particular, they need to be actively considering the potential effects of a more autonomous or even potentially independent New Caledonia. Think about regional security arrangements, economic partnerships, diplomatic relationships across the Pacific. It changes the dynamic. And this is especially pertinent given the increasing interest of other global powers, in this strategically important region.
So it sounds like Canberra needs to be paying very close attention to these developments.
I would think so, yes.
And the fact that France offered to hand over elements of sovereignty, coupled with their commitment to proceeding with the census despite the recent tensions, that suggests a significant shift in their own strategic thinking, doesn't it?
It certainly seems that way.
Maybe even a recognition of the changing realities on the ground.
That's a key observation. France's willingness to offer greater sovereignty, even if it creates political headwinds for them back home.
Which it apparently did.
Yes, and their commitment to the census, despite the sensitive timing. It does indicate a recognition, as the interpreter suggests, perhaps even a kind of bowing to the inevitable regarding the long-term trajectory of New Caledonia. It signals a pragmatic approach, perhaps, to a very complex situation.
But despite the failure of these recent high-level talks to reach a big breakthrough, it seems the door to future dialogue hasn't been completely slammed shut.
That's encouraging, yes.
Right.
Despite the significant disagreements, all parties involved reportedly remain committed to the overall process. That's crucial.
Okay.
Unlike in some previous instances, no one completely abandoned the negotiating table this time. They even identified several specific points of agreement, which at least provide some foundation for future discussions.
Something to build on.
Hopefully. And independence leader Emmanuel Jabau's description of the talks as one step offers, a glimmer of cautious optimism.
Just one step, though.
Just one step. But, as the interpreter also points out, Minister Valls faces considerable political challenges within France itself over this, which adds another layer of complexity to the whole situation.
All right, the domestic politics back in Paris.
Okay.
So to sort of bring it all together, we've seen a breakdown in recent high-level negotiations on New Caledonia's future. This stems from fundamentally different visions, a federalist approach rejected because of the Nouméa Accord versus a French offer of delegated sovereignty that was met with, strong reservations, especially from loyalists.
Correct.
And underpinning all of this are these significant demographic shifts that are likely to continue shifting the political balance towards the Kanak population, potentially reaching 50%.
A key driver, yes.
The issue of electoral reform remains a key flashpoint, a trigger for recent violence, but maybe there's potential for incremental progress there.
A possibility.
And for Australia and the wider Pacific, the evolving situation carries substantial strategic weight. This is really a critical issue for anyone seeking to understand the dynamics of the Indo-Pacific region.
Precisely. This situation really encapsulates the ongoing complexities of decolonization in the 21st century, and that intricate interplay of national identity, demographic change, and regional geopolitics. It's all happening in a strategically vital part of the world.
So a final thought, perhaps. Considering these demographic trends we've discussed and France's evolving position, what might a truly stable and long-term political solution for New Caledonia ultimately look like? And maybe just as importantly, what role should regional partners like Australia proactively play in fostering that future stability? It's certainly a question with significant implications for the region.
Indeed, that raises a critical question for you, the listener, to perhaps consider further as you reflect on this deep dive.
Well, we hope this deep dive has provided you with a clearer understanding of the complex and evolving situation in New Caledonia.
We hope so.
If you found this informative and relevant to your understanding of current global issues, particularly in the Pacific, and maybe useful for those of you preparing for exams like the UPSC, please do like and subscribe for more in-depth analyses.
Your support helps us continue these discussions.
Absolutely. And please share your thoughts, any further questions you might have, in the comments below. We always appreciate hearing from you. And remember, the source material for this deep dive was The Interpreter